Hello everyone and welcome back to Silicon Sounds, audio for the rest of us. Today I have the pleasure of reviewing the 64Audio U12T. I like to nickname this review the TruthSayer. It's been one of the most difficult reviews I've had to do. If I were to label the 64Audio offering, I would call it simple complexity. That's how I would describe the U12T. Such as the dichotomy that is the 64Audio U12T, and I am of definite undeniable talents, being pliable in ways I've never had the pleasure of listening to and experiencing before. After receiving this as a very generous loan from a friend, I wasn't really aware of what I'd be up against when dealing with the most expensive IEM to grace my hungry ears. The retail for this is $2,000 USD. A little bit of the fine notes about it. It features 12 balanced armature drivers per side with additional technologies. And let's get into that right now. And I got one major one right here on the review table. One is TIA, tubeless inert audio. LID, linear impedance design, and Apex, air pressure exchange modules. I'm going to discuss them a little bit to give a little bit of background, or I should say a foundation to the rest of this review. Via the Apex modules, the sound signature mostly affecting the bass shelf, but also isolation, of course, and consequently the overall sound can be slightly or drastically altered. Here we have the Apex modules. They pull out. I'll pull one out. You see how small they are? Each of these modules fits into the earphone. I'll show you where. And it comes with 3 different modules. Each of them do affect the sound quite noticeably. Here's the Apex module. You can see to pull it out, just pull firmly and the module will pop out, and then you'll put another one in. And your listening pleasure will follow. Trust me about that. The sound can be slightly or drastically altered. This is the pliable aspect of the U12T. And with this tuning method, the U12T can easily change from the IM with ultra clean mixing board sonics, and it is used quite often in a professional environment for mixing and finalizing the mix in different music, to a fun bass forward presentation. Interestingly enough, all the while retaining its core characteristics, all with a very easy to swap module. This is quite a feat, and I applaud 64Audio for doing the research and taking the time to get this right. And they've got it right. Admittedly, it's not an IEM. Once I popped it in my ear, that caught my ear sonically right away. The first thing I did notice was its rich and textured bass. In my opinion, as of the publishing of this particular review, this is the best, by far, balanced armature bass I've ever heard. And some of the bass, if not the best bass production I've heard, regardless of the driver tech involved. It's impressive, very impressive. Only after time spent cable source rolling and spending dedicated quality time listening was I made aware of what the 64Audio U12T or U12T brings to the table. It really is a reflector of what you put in, and rewards the listener with great sonics and lays bare nuances and details and tracks that had me going through my music collection like a rabid dog. At $2,000 USD, one should expect stellar performance, and this is what you're getting here. You're getting stellar performance. And yes, that's what it does provide. The question here I'll put to you is any IEM? And I have a load of IEMs here, all much less expensive than the U12T. But let me answer the question. Is any IEM worth the kilobucks? Well, let me put it to you like this. Audio is a very personal and at best subjective pursuit. Consequently, only an individual can really make, at least ultimately, make these types of purchase decisions based on how and what value they put on their musical enjoyment. If they have the means to do so, this is a great choice. Please note for this review, the Apex module that I did use was the M15 and M20. There's also an MX that really basically flattens out the bass shelf, Fantastic if you want to hear every little thing, pin drops, everything that goes on in the music. But let's continue. Specs. So 1 TIA high driver, 1 mid driver, 6 mid drivers, 4 low drivers. All of these are what accounts or amounts to the 12 balanced armature drivers per side. 108 decibels per milliwatt sensitivity, actually quite easy to drive. Integrated 4-way crossover. Now, coming from home audio, a crossover can make or break an IEM, or at least a pair of speakers. And 64Audio realizes this, in particular with the complexity of the different technologies in here, and it is a tour de force in tech. I'll tell you that right now. To make it a tour de force in tech and also a tour de force in sonics, in sound, tip my hat. So that's what they've done here. Obviously, the crossover, they'd spent a lot of time and attention to it. There is one tech that means that any impedance load that is fine for output impedance for amplifiers will not affect the sound of the IEM. This is one of the 4 core technologies built in, quite impressive. Apex technology isolation, again, there's 3 filters, one of which is installed. I think that's the MX20. They do affect the bass shelf significantly, and also isolation at 20 given -20. Then there's -15 and -10 dB for the last Apex module. Equipment used for this review are my topping A50S amplifier with the Sanskrit 10th Mark II DAC, EIDA 903 and 903.8 SG3. Tips were Final Audio E Clairs. Also, I found a generic Final Audio E Clear copy or close facsimile, but with a wider bore, which I settled on, which worked very well with this as well. Luna Shop 16-core S high HPC copper cable was used as well. Care Bear Rhyme was used, and that's actually what I was using up until I was listening to it just a few days ago. And I was using the SPC from Luna Shops for most of the listening, actually. Let's talk about build, fit, and quality. Well, excellent build quality, and you could demand or ask for nothing less from something at this price. Very well built, very sturdy. The shells are of medium to large size and do appear bulky. You could look at them right now, and they do appear somewhat bulky. But obviously a lot of attention was paid not just to the sound and the tech, but the fit, because the fit was excellent. Generous nozzle size and protrusion is perfect, allowing you to get good insertion depth and a proper seal, of course with proper tip selection. So let's continue. I did only receive the earphones, the Apex modules, and a cable, the stock cable, which I did not use. So I'm not sure on hand personally of what the retail presentation was like, but I can tell you from looking online that it's in line with its asking price. Let's talk about sound. Bass. The bass is what stood out when I first listened to the U12T. To be fair, it kind of threw me off because I'd spent the recent time prior to listening to this auditioning earphones that were more of a lean, I would call it bright neutral type of tuning. So it did require some time for my ears to reset and adjust. In fact, I stopped listening to all IEMs for about 2-3 days. I just thought that these would be really special, and I wanted to really reset my hearing. I started listening to my reset IEM, which is my High Senior Mega 5P, to also get my ears used to neutrality, and then I could listen to these and be more clear with my observations. Once my ears did settle down, I came back and now could more easily appreciate this amazing low end, the bass of the U12T. Bass focus is more sub-bass oriented than the typical mid-bass bloom exhibited by all too many IEMs these days. Manufacturers, IEM boosted mid-bass is not always natural. This I prefer, absolutely. No need to mention BA or Balanced Armature bass, as what's served up here is just plain incredibly good bass, period. Bass focus, again, more sub-bass oriented. Bass goes exceptionally deep and is quite impactful no matter what genre, with great dynamics. The lowest notes never felt behind the rest of the frequency range. In many IAMs that I've listened to, lesser than this, of course, the cost, bass seems to trail, especially on heavy, very busy tracks with a very complex bass line. Bass seems to almost fall behind the rest of the track. Never happened here. Drums were tight and clean, demanding electronic music, house music, drum and bass, etc. were played with excellent resolution, detail, and speed. Angel by Massive Attack, one of the tracks I use, love Massive Attack, has a throbbing, driving bass line with an actual very discernible texture when it's played back well, which is lost on a lot of with many sets I've heard. Not on the U12T, the texture was very clearly and audibly heard. The bass impact and power were all there, while not clouding or muddying any other part of the frequency range. Busier tracks were also no problem for playback. Probably one of the reasons why the U12T is so loved for professionals, in that you really hear what's in there and not much can disturb it in the track. Whether it's a busy track, sparsely recorded, you'll all hear it. It never sounded congested at all. Acoustic double bass sounded splendid, really attesting to the timbral accuracy that the U12T can produce, not just in the bass, but moving up to the mids and treble as well. For example, the double bass heard in Maiden Voyage and No Worries by Robert Glasper sounded fantastic. Very technical performances to be had here. Excellent pacing and control. Bass was also readily on tap if the track called for it. The U12T would play it back with suitable power and impact. Too often, and this is a little rant, too often IMs with notable bass focus come off as sounding contrived, artificial, and just plain fatiguing after a certain amount of time. The 64Audio U12T manages to completely avoid this pitfall. This here, folks, is bass tuning done well and right. No fatigue noted, and the way the low end is tuned really fleshes out the sound without adding undue warmth to the mid-range or muddying the sound at all, remaining as a solid foundation to any track. Very well done. Let's talk about the mid-range. The mid-range. Well, here we go. 64Audio 12T offers a mid-range that is more forward than recessed. Its technical prowess here is quite evident with an open, clean, and detailed presentation combined with excellent separation. No harshness was noted, and the mid-range has very natural, organic character to it. Surprisingly, even with this high level of detail retrieval, and we're talking macro and micro details retrieval off the chart, very, very good. The U12T never sounded clinical. And strangely enough, I found this, unlike the Moji Monica, for example, which has great mids as well, but to contrast with the U12T was actually very forgiving for tracks of dubious recording quality. Male and female voices were rendered well with excellent clarity and more intimate than distant placement. Tracy Thorn's vocals on Protection by Massive Attack, Soft Words by Meja as well, sounded exceptionally good. On to male vocals were Tenderhearted Lover by John Stoddart and Closer to Heaven by the underrated, incomparable Phil Perry sounded full and detailed. Both macro and micro details are abundant, yet it never sounded clinical once again. In fact, this review could have been finished earlier or actually in half the time, if I had not been pulled into the music so frequently where instead of listening critically, it became critical for me to listen. I just got lost in the music. Such is the alluring essence of the mid-range here. This also may be the nature of the particular tuning module I was using. I did try the MX module. I tried the M15, the M20. I chose one that I found was the most balanced for me for the review. I believe it's the MX module. Pretty much gets rid of that bass shelf and is more for mixing and technical performance. I could see once again the pliable characteristics on stage here with the U12T. Transits, okay, these are handled exceptionally well. With the natural leading and trailing edge. The impact and dynamics are also high grade, with rim shots and snares sounding natural and not overdone, yet suitably sharp and forceful. Not overdone, no embellishments here. Many IEMs of different price ranges, for example, will have a boosted treble that's boosted to the point where it's unnatural, or a boosted upper mid-range, which sounds as if it was adding detail, but brightness does not necessarily mean detail. The U12T eschews all of that and just has a very natural sound. In terms of soundstage is quite large, great layering and imaging. No wonder it's employed by pro sound engineers. These characteristics in part allow the IEM to do something that few other IEMs, and I have a lot of them here, have actually accomplished. And that is to be able to hear the space and silence between the notes. For those who know what I'm talking about, when it comes to music, it's not just the notes. It's the space between the notes that builds that emotion and also pulls you in and forms that connection. And that's what we have here. Treble. Treble is well extended with a level of detail and clarity that is impressive, much like the rest of the frequency range. The presentation here is all about being natural without any embellishments. There's also ample air and sparkle when it's called for in the track. When it's called for in the track, you will get the air and sparkle as intended. There we go, focus. Right. Detail is exceptionally good. The cymbal work on Ronnie Jordan's Vanston Place 12 AM was crisp and extremely clean. The intricate cymbal work on No Worries by Robert Glasper Trio was rendered with great organic clarity and control that was really impressive. This is a very interesting track. Robert Glasper's No Worries by the Robert Glasper Trio, also known as Trois. This track can really get busy, even though it's a trio. And the U12T never broke a sweat, always sounding poised and natural all the time. Never got ragged in the treble. Give that track a listen and you'll see what I mean. In a nutshell, the 64Audio U12T has a treble that, like the rest of the frequency range, just shines. With technical prowess and a natural presentation that is more than pleasing. Coming back to imaging and soundstage, it's a standout. The expansive vista displayed has ample servings of width, height, and yes, even the depth element is there, which is missing in so many different earphones. Imaging within that soundscape is exceptionally stable, with instrument placement done with ease, attesting to the great layering that's available here. It's easy to get lost into the music here. With well-recorded live tracks such as Stimula by the late great Hugh Masekela, the U12T easily conveys the dimensions of the venue and the placement of the performers with great accuracy. Another triumph for the U12T. Let's talk a little bit verses. We have a lot of IEMs on the table here. I'm going to pull out one of my favorites, the High Senior Mega 5P. With respect to money and cost, none of these can match. This is a $2,000 IEM versus a $300 and some odd IEM. You would figure it would be blown away. And realistically, on almost every metric, I'd have to say yes. Except for one. The Mega 5P is actually a little bit more neutral. I never said that the U12T was perfectly neutral. It is not, but the Mega 5P is what I call my reset IEM. It's what I use to reset my hearing when I'm ready to listen to something and really open up my ears to, in this case, the exceptional performance of the U12T. Otherwise, on every other metric, the U12T just is above. In terms of layer separation in particular, which is a slight weakness of the 5P, not that bad compared to a lot of others, but when you listen to the two, then you realize it. Also, the sweetness of the treble in the Mega 5P is fantastic, but another level on the 12T, just another level. When it comes to bass performance, the Mega 5P is actually very good, What you hear in the track is what's in the track is what you're going to hear, I should say. Please excuse me. But when it comes to overall bass performance, nothing I've heard can touch the U12T. Does that mean that I'm going to throw these in the garbage? Well, no. The Mega 5P, I love them. I'm going to keep them. They're in steady rotation. And I don't own the U12T. Again, a loaner from a very generous friend. But when you hear something like this, you realize what you've been missing. Let's talk about the... Here we are. AudioSense DT600, $300 plus at the time of this video. Again, 1/8 the price, 1/6 the price, sorry, of the U12T. The DT600 is. In terms of looks, I'll give the DT600 its props. Beautiful looking. Let's talk about everything else. Bass, and again, the DT600 is a chameleon. With the help of a 75 ohm adapter, it can change its sound quality completely, presentation, I should say. I prefer it with the 75 ohm adapter, which makes it more bright, neutral, but still with great bass. But on every metric, it's the U12T. Now, in some instances, the DT600 actually sounds more detailed, but on closer inspection to the sound, you'll realize that, again, brightness is not detail. And the DT600 has exceptional layering and detail. But it just, when you listen deeply into the music, it cannot match the U12T. In terms of organics, in terms of timbre, the U12T is just on a different planet. The DT600 is good, but you do get a sense sometimes of that BA timbre, with which you do not get on the U12T, even though it's an all BA. Both of them are all BA sets. Again, we're talking about 1/8 the price, or I should say 1/7 or whatever it is the price. But this is all I have to compare it with. The U12T is just on another level. I've heard many people state that when you get over a certain price, it's no longer about the tech. Now it's about tuning. Well, that's true to an extent, but not with 64Audio's offering here. It's also about the tech. It's always about the implementation when it comes to tech, and 64Audio have done a fantastic job with some very advanced technology built into the U12T and others in their stable. So, conclusion. With the U12T, 64Audio has on offer a technological tour de force in an IEM. That's great. Lots of tech. Who cares? How does it sound? Well, how does it sound? The 64Audio U12T is the most technically impressive IEM I've ever had the pleasure of listening to, with a sound that pulls me into the music every time I listen to it. The integration of the 12 drivers is done seamlessly, adding immensely to its inherent immersion qualities. It's also a very flexible beast with the tuning modules that have a clearly discernible effect on the sound, but again, not affecting its inherent positive characteristics. The combination of leading-edge tech, tuning flexibility, and stellar sound points to an IEM that deserves to be called high-end. Deserves to be called high-end. At this price range, it can sometimes come down to tuning preferences and implementation as opposed to tech and driver quality. That's not really the case here. The tech in the U12T is above what a lot, if not everyone, is offering these days. But again, it's all about implementation, and 64Audio have hit the nail on the head. With its Apex modules, it's extremely versatile in this department. With respect to sonics, other IEMs have different ways of tuning their things. That's fine. Tuning their sound, tailoring it the way you want it. But all the other inherent techs and the way that they're implemented seamlessly together is something that 64Audio has to be proud of. Fantastic listen. Even so, I can't guarantee that everyone, 100% of listeners who listen to it, will love it as much as I have. Such is the subjective nature of sound reproduction. 2K USD price is also not pocket change for the vast majority of people. That being said, the pleasure a music lover gleans from their collection has no price on it. For those to whom the asking price is within reach, the 64Audio U12T will be a fantastic choice, and as such, should be very high on their list of IEMs that they're checking out. All said and done, the 64Audio U12T gets a solid recommendation from Silicon Sounds. Thanks for joining us once again. Hope to see you soon with another video. Take care. Goodbye for now.